Good morning. You're watching Morning at NTV. Very relevant conversations we've been having this morning. First, of course, Reality on the Ground, taking us through your thoughts on the new social media tax, of course, as well as mobile money. And for those who are online, but for some reason you've not paid taxes, be careful. Don't tell your neighbor. Yes, on Take Note, I thought we'd take the conversation still about not just the Women's March, but I thought we'd have a broader discussion, and especially around activism. I've said to you a couple of weeks back that I was very uncomfortable when I watched a woman actually protest, and what she was protesting for was for me and you women, yeah? And she was saying these murders have happened, these kidnaps have happened, the investigations are going on, we don't have any accountability, what's happening there? And I asked myself, why am I uncomfortable? Why is it that we leave activists to be a certain breed of women and men who do this, and then the rest of us just benefit from them fighting for our rights? So in studio, I'm joined by Flavia Kaule. You're a teacher, a politician, but most of all, a women's rights activist.
Yes.
Good morning, Flavia.
Good morning, Flavia.
Yeah, and this morning, I think people are saying, two women, women's rights? No! Because they're used to us being very passionate about our rights. But over the weekend, I saw probably a new wave of women protesting, and men, by the way.
And men too.
Men
That's
too.
important.
Who came out to stand together peacefully, but also, I don't know, we've changed the way we talk about our issues. Where, as they used to say, we're no longer angry. We are angry, but we're directing our anger differently.
Yes.
Now, I didn't get the chance to, the opportunity to actually attend for different reasons, but you did. You were at the Women's March. So before we go any further into, you know, what we stand for, what happened, what were your take notes from it? Talk to us.
Thank you very much, Flavia. And I want to say good morning to the entire nation that's watching us. For us, Saturday, the weekend was a very exciting event. It was a very exciting weekend. It was a phenomenal event. It was a defining moment for so many of us and for so many women out there. So building on to the conversation that was here before, it was about unanswered questions, challenging the status quo. It was about getting the people to act out. We have had the speeches, we have had the promises, we have had the prayers, we have had all the funny things that don't really negate to what you are talking about, but it was time for us to say enough is enough. Look, besides all these things that you're saying, what is actually happening? Can you start giving us crucial answers? Can you give us concrete answers that we can build on and work on? And for us, it was good to see that we had this entire gathering of women. No one brought those women. No one paid for them. Like some people are saying they were paid to come and protest.
Or saying that they were funding
somewhere. Or they were being funded. No one funded anyone in that march. It was from passion, people's sense of loss, people's pain, people's anger, the women's anger. And I'm very glad that you pointed out that we had men there. Yes. We work with men as allies in the fight for women's rights. We recognize that we are in a deeply patriarchal setting that listens to men, gives men the authority to be listened to and to be heard rather than the women. So knowing, with that knowledge at the back of our minds, we always work with men as allies in the fight for gender rights, especially women's rights. So we had different people in there, and the three key issues we were demanding for: one is to be given concrete answers on what happened to these women. Reports haven't been
What's from the investigations?
How far with the investigations? What's the team? It's very unfortunate that we've had all these women murders and there was silence. The president just came out to speak about the issues when Honorable Abiriga died. So that shows you the level of patriarchy, that if a man, one man, something bad happens to him, and everyone, the entire nation, will rise up in arms. But all these 40 so women that have been dying, and there's been grave silence until we, the women, rose up and started writing letters, started petitioning, started demonstrating, started strikes, and that was the climax of all our issues. Then secondly, we're looking at issues of besides the stories and the demand, but then what next? How are we going to be protected as women? How are we seeking justice, social justice in this era and in this time, in these very hard times? How are we restoring hope to a young woman out there in the village. My village in Buteka, people are getting murdered. People in Mubende district are getting murdered. People in Bujiri are getting murdered. Tororo, everywhere, all over the country.
Even trusting their neighbors.
We no longer trust
Yes.
neighbors. And in fact, it's very unfortunate, Flavia, because there is a statement that was said by one of our colleagues, Ramadan Govi, that the poor people don't sleep in Uganda anymore. And why don't they sleep? Because they are hungry. They are looking for something to eat. They are looking for money. They are looking for that, so they never sleep. But it's more unfortunate that the rich also don't sleep. And why aren't the rich sleeping? Because of the poor that are hungry. Because if you're rich, you know, lately people build houses. But on those houses, they put very high walls, then you put electric fences, then you put what, but you can't even sleep because you're always worried.
Made that point and said, regardless of how you breed those dogs to be strong and the walls high, if everyone is not secure, it's a problem. You can't just secure a number of people and then leave the rest out.
So that's why we are marching, and also to create awareness around people that they need to stop blaming victims. You know, we have had people saying they called for it. Because it was discovered that most of the women that were getting killed were sex workers. So people were saying, but you see, they called for it. Why do they do that kind of job? But you see, every time you blame the victim without addressing the issue, the critical cause, then you are just like the ostrich burying your head in the sand with your entire body outside, because we need to address the core reasons as to why things are happening, regardless of who. It's not only prostitutes that get murdered. We have seen high-profile people getting murdered in their homes, right by their homes. So stop blaming victims and rather focus on the cause and how to address those issues.
You talked about victims, and that's a very key thing to look at, because when we're talking about sexual harassment in the workplace or anywhere in life, victims are afraid to speak up for different reasons. Sometimes the person who has sexually harassed you is in a position of power, sometimes their family, and we've seen how you've been saying accountability. It's not there, you're thinking go to the police, but the other one's case was not, so how is mine going to be handled? But in terms of how we accept victims and accept victims' situations and stories, do you feel there's a case of men are being heard more than the women, or you think it's just generally victim stories are not heard? It doesn't matter your gender.
That's a very important question, Flavia, because we that work a lot with the police have found challenges. Even we that work in the communities with women, you encourage women to speak out, especially on sexual harassment, on gender-based violence. But very few women speak out, and very few cases are reported at the police stations. Why? Because they say that once you speak out, you're going to get a backlash, a negative backlash on you. First of all, if it's your husband or if it's your relative, your spouse, or anyone. We just saw recently the girl that murdered, that killed a rapist, someone that was trying to rape them, ended up being thrown in prison. So it's about the perceptions, how society perceives rape, sexual harassment, how they perceive defilement, how they perceive gender-based violence. In the society we are brought in and that we are in right now, the society glorifies a man more than it does a woman, and it gives more reason for the men to be listened to and believed in than the woman. So you find that cases such as sexual harassment, when a woman is sexually harassed, and how are they going to be harassed? It may be either verbal harassment, verbal sexual harassment. There are so many men downtown and even uptown that like referring to women by their body parts. You know, I like your hips. You have big hips. You have nice legs. Oh, your boobs are juicy, and statements like that. Downtown is worse. They tap your breasts. They tap your bum. All that is verbal. Verbal what? Abuse. Verbal sexual harassment. Then we have the physical, where they literally touch, they grab you, or they, hug you in very uncomfortable position and things like that. Then we have the psychological sexual harassment. You just keep making these remarks or making these cat eyes, or, looking at someone in funny ways. And the verbal also includes things like how you say certain things to someone. So, because they have normalized, the society has normalized such issues, we no longer see it as insane
problem,
or even
yeah.
as a problem. Even when you go to police to report such cases, the police ends up laughing at your face and saying, oh, it's your husband that has beaten you. Yeah, but that is how marriage should be. And even as women are going into marriage, they are told, Guma, like, hang in there. Why? Because a woman is supposed to be there to take it in all.
Yeah.
That is your marriage. You're supposed to hold it upright, and you're not supposed to divorce. So whatever happens to you in there, you have to hang in there, and that hanging in is what is caused.
Let me ask you,
the
Flavia,
problem
and
right
this
now.
is something I've thought about for a long time, because they always ask us women to step up.
Yes.
Step up and be in positions of leadership. Step up and be role models. Show young women an example that you are there, so that they can have an example to say, but if Flavia is there, then I can also. But then you have an issue where there's life and reality, you know, life and reality. Because if I am sexually harassed or abused,
Yes.
and I'm in a position in society of influence, and say I speak out and I say this has happened to me, and I'm judged, the next woman who has been looking at me as someone who is of influence is going to say, if even Flavia. So instead of me being an example where people can say, if she has spoken out in her position of influence, I should speak out, we find that we get the reverse instead. It's women saying, oh, if even someone in parliament can get beaten, surely I should stay there. So how do we even deal with this?
I understand where you're coming from and the predicament in which we find ourselves as women. But you see, it's all a mindset thing. And it's how we are brought out. We are brought up told women are not supposed to speak against certain issues. First of all, you're supposed to be very submissive. You're supposed to take it in all silently. So the time when we see certain women breaking barriers and trying to come out and speaking out, when we saw the former vice president of Uganda, Honorable Kazwe, the time she came out to speak out, it was a national crime. It was a national incident.
Yet it should have been the most powerful.
It created a lot of impact. Now the blame became the media, and that's why sometimes I'm very angry with the media and how they portray women and how they trivialize issues of women, because rather than focusing on the issues that was experiencing violence within her home, then they focused it to, if this kind of person can be beaten,
that's what I was
then
trying to
why
say.
should you other people, low women, come out, you know, to speak about this? And that is what creates a sense of fear among the women. That is why women decide to keep quiet and get beaten to an extent of getting killed within their marriages or within their workplaces or within, it's broad, whichever area. There is no space that is safe for anyone, especially when it comes to abuse. So that means that we activists have to constantly speak out. We have to speak out on behalf of other people. So we are talking about what activism really means. And this is what it really means. There are so many silent voices out there. So many people who are afraid to come out and say this is what it should be. So that is why every society needs activists, because an activist is that person who will speak about the wrong, the injustice we have seen, and that will come out to create positive influence and positive change about that issue. And this can be done through demonstrations, this can be done through strikes, this can be done through sit-ins, hunger strikes, and all those things that the way we've
Let me ask you, you've talked about our mindset. You've talked about, and I think hinting there, culture sometimes as well. So, and by the way, by the time that story of the former vice president came out, I feel like today, if the story had come out today, I feel like it was worse then. Our mindset has slightly changed now. I think now we're more accepting of such stories coming out. I mean, she still wouldn't have received 100% applause, but I feel like some women would have said, kudos. If someone like you can come out to say it, then it's great. But do we have an environment or a platform for women who, even if they're brave to speak out, can still get, can still be nurtured in the community and still be, get answers, get help, get rehabilitated? Do we have that?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do, because I know a number of organizations like Uganda Women's Network, WONET, I know of Bifumi, I know of CEDOVIP, Center for Domestic Violence, Raising Voices. Most of those organizations, most of the women's rights organizations have tried to put up shelters so that first they move you out of the scene of abuse or violence, so that you can first recover yourself and know who you are and get physically and psychologically better, because it's a whole process. And through there and from within those shelters, there are so many counseling sessions that are offered in there, so that the woman can actually reclaim her sanity and her dignity. It takes time, but you see, when we have powerful people like those coming out to speak, it gives, and it also builds momentum for others. You know, it kind of shows them that if that person can speak out, then I too can speak out. It's a double-edged sword. It can work against you or for you. But most of the times we encourage people to speak out, because if you speak out, then you can easily attract help to you. People can help you, people can divert it, people can stop it, people can deal with the perpetrators, who are usually men most of the times, and the culture. That's why we also have to continuously talk about the culture. You've talked about if Kaziwe, Honorable Kaziwe, had come out to speak now, today, probably it would have been received in a better manner than then it was then. But that's because times change. Yes. We are in a very revolving time. So, and that's because also culture changes. Most people are afraid to change cultural practices that are really negative. But I constantly tell them in societies that it is through talking about these negative cultural practices that they get to change. Otherwise, culture is not static. It is supposed to change according to the times. You protect what you think is right or what you think is good,
what you also think should change.
And you change what you think is wrong. So changing the mindsets of how men perceive women, and this takes us in the areas of leadership as well. How do they perceive women leaders? How do they perceive women journalists like you? How do they perceive women lawyers? How do they perceive women in leadership, especially big leadership positions? That is a culture change that can be worked on with time. It's gradual, but at least the more you constantly talk about it, the more awareness you create and the more people accept it. And it starts with you. That's the thing we forget.
I want to ask you eventually how we can each break down, because women's rights or women for development, it's not just for Flavia, probably. No, it's for each of us.
Yes.
And we can't leave it to you and say, oh, she's an activist, fight for our rights, and eventually we'll enjoy the freedoms.
No,
but also, I like it when we break down things to every single woman. Because you and I are in different lives. There's another woman in a different life. There's one who woke up to look after her children and doesn't know how she will do it. You understand? So everyone has a way to fight for rights or defend themselves differently. So I would like us to probably do that breakdown. But let's first talk about women for women and also the role of men. Because many have said, but even you women sometimes don't stand for each other. So why do we need to to stand for you? Is it that we're highlighting the few cases of women that don't stand for each other? Or maybe you and I are blind to it. Maybe women don't stand for each other.
First of all, let me tell you something about Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde is a very famous feminist and one that was very passionate about fighting for women's rights. She made a statement that the weapons of the powerless will never be understood by the powerful. You can never understand whichever ways we choose to show our powerlessness. So in this, she was talking about dismantling patriarchy and what you can go through. But to connect it to what you're telling me, for me, I'm just tired of hearing this pull her down syndrome, because they keep saying women like
pull each other down.
Women don't support each other. Yes, in some spaces, yes, it actually does exist. But we also have to understand that it is not a competition. We are here to complement each other. Flavia, I cannot do your job, and you can't do my job. Even when we are in the same area of work, we cannot. Yes, we have unique characteristics around us that build us and that make you who you are and that make me who I am. So we can never be one and the same. So what we have to learn to do is to work with each other, because this society, already we as women, we have so much
against us.
You know,
Yes.
we have very draconian laws against us. We have the patriarchy setting that is against us. We are fighting the different negative cultural practices. We are fighting the gender imbalances. We are fighting so much already. The different economic empowerment that belittles. We are fighting men's demeaning, women
Let's
and
not
women
add to it.
demeaning, you know. So if you are a woman out there and you are in a powerful position, my advice would be, see how to mentor the young ones, you know, because times change and we grow old. Eventually you'll need to move. But even when you're moving, who is going to replace you? We are already crying for numbers. In Parliament, we have 449 members of Parliament, and only 154 of these are women. And to make matters worse, only 19 of these came in on direct seats. So already you see that there is that huge gender imbalance. When you look at the ministers recently in the Buganda government, in the Buganda Women's Convention, one of the key asks we demanded for as women in Buganda to the Prime Minister, the Katikkiro of Buganda, was to increase the numbers of women in the Buganda government. Because there are only 24 currently, as we speak, out of 80, so and so. So you see that the numbers are just not matching up. And so, as women, it is very important that we support each other.
In the small space we have, let's fight for each other.
It is important that we mentor each other. Some of us are where we are right now because of the women's movement mentorship. We have people like Honorable Irene Vonji, Patricia Munabi, Rita Chiro. These are people that have helped pull us up along the way. And
I hear what you're saying. What you're saying is, in the small space we have, don't say that there are no women's position. Bring them along.
Exactly.
So that when you leave, the space is still there. And as we're running out of time, but as we wind up, that question that I did ask, how can each of us, women, girls, at any age group, at any sector we're working in, how can we champion women's rights? Is it upon us to change our mindset? Are we, being activists? Is it a different role for each person, or there's a collectiveness here?
It's not a different role for everyone. When you see women on the streets demonstrating, when you see them getting naked in Amuru because of their land, when you see women in Napak on the streets fighting for an ambulance, it's not an individual task. They are not working for their own good only. No, we have to understand that people have various capacities. There's a rural woman who will not be able to come on the streets and demonstrate, but she has the same issue. So Flavia, who can and who has access to the media to speak about these issues, will be able to work on her behalf. So while the other person is facing challenges, and I will sit with them and understand their challenges, they may not be as articulate on talking about these challenges. So everyone has their roles to play, but these roles eventually come to a collective that we are all working for social justice, especially when it comes to women's rights. We are all working for a better Uganda, the Uganda that we all feel like we belong to, so that as that person who is in the garden right now and is working so hard to take their children to school, at the same time will be able to benefit from the services that are given at the national level, and rather not be imposed, given a heavier tax burden like we are right now seeing, the imposing of all these taxes over the board taxes, So we have to find a way of breaking down these things to our people to understand that it starts with the leader you vote for at the village level. Are you voting for a person who really understands these issues and has a voice and has networks that can help them or lobby for services that are going to change our communities? Or are you voting for a person who is simply going to say yes in Parliament, who is simply going to say yes in council, and is going to forget the core reason as to why he's there, effectively representing you?
I hear you.
So it starts with us, and it starts with the decisions we
And
make.
I like that. What I would take from that part is that, you elect leaders, they might understand your plight, but not be able to do anything about your plight. So be careful about that. I think we're questioning our leaders even more, and more each day. So when we're looking at this leader, they might understand you purely because maybe they even relate, but they're not going to do anything. The network is important. Who they are, what they can do for you is quite important. Women's rights are not just for me, Flavia and Flavia. They're for you and I. And as she said, start from whatever you can do in your role, in your community, and then it will eventually trickle up and, champion. So it's been a great discussion. It doesn't stop here. If you've paid your taxes, the hashtag is morning at NTV. Have a lovely morning.